welcome back. It's great to see that we have even more participants here than earlier in the morning. Very well. So, and we will start up right now because we are having 4 speakers in this session. And first of all, I would like to introduce Liene Salmia from Latvia. And she is going to speak about the Latvian author's literary contribution in a Siberian magazine. So, floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I should probably begin with introducing myself in the sense that my story will be a bit different from the previous ones. First of all, I won't talk so much about history only, but about the present as well. And I will switch from west to east. And the background of case study I'm presenting to you today is based in my job experience as a teacher, as a language teacher in diaspora. There were several years I spent in different diaspora groups in Russia. And apart my direct teacher job tasks and functions, I was lucky to experience something more. And I found it actually quite important and amazing and worth to tell others. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that I was accepted. So I hope that you will find it interesting as well. And today it is about, as already it was mentioned, about how, basically about how article for Siberian magazine was created. And this article was about Latvian author Melānija Vanaga. Some of you might know her because she was one of the deported or exiled Latvians in 1941 to Siberia, to one of those camps. She was lucky to survive, but even more, she becomes a novel personality because she wrote a great novel about that time, which is, in my opinion, one of the best evidences I have ever read or heard about this tragic period of not only Latvian nation history, but actually quite many. So, and that was the thing, that one day when I was in Krasnoyarsk as a teacher in Latvian society, journalist approached me asking to help to create article, because when they had this task to do it, where to look for evidences, where to look for information. Okay, we know there is a Latvian society, so we go and ask them. And since funny situation is that not always Latvian societies are competent about different issues and historical questions which are linked with their nation. They ask teacher to help them. So, and our goal basically was, yes, to create this article about Melānija Vanaga and her life story, partly in Siberia for those 16 years, since they consider her as a part of their heritage right now, while Latvians honor her as a Latvian novelty as well. And the reason why I bring up this case study is because actually today, of course in a different perspective, but still slightly I find it similar, that we again are challenging the issues about how to accept different cultures and different political attitudes. And regarding that, I have a feeling that, and I have read a bit as well, that Europe is again chasing like challenging these things that We have refugees, and we have to find a way how to collaborate with them, and they are different. And at some point, I found it similar as it was in Siberia at some point, when a huge amount of people from different countries were sent there, and they met with the locals as well. Of course, the whole situation, the harsh climate, made it harder for them to survive and adapt. But even more, it makes it a lesson to learn about. And then, at some point, I provided this hypothesis that this case study, actually, this experience, first of all, underlined the importance of the so-called memory institutions as museums and archives, which professionals, of course, evaluate and understand what's the meaning of them, but people from other fields, we sometimes actually don't. There are no reason for it sometimes, because if we have other materials, what to use in our daily life, for our main tasks, we don't approach it. We don't look for them. But this case study showed that it was very important that it was, and as a for teacher, it was not ordinary situation, in a sense that first of all, there were institutions in different countries, in countries which don't have friendly relationships, let's say so, and the countries which don't share the same language. So luckily, people more or less can find common language to communicate. And then for this case study, my target was basically to describe transnational interactions, creating a piece of media above national heritage. And I tried to answer several questions, maybe not fully answered, but at least partly. And later on in the story, you will hear them. So to do it, since I already in my master thesis, which were about the communication between Latvia and Latvians in Siberia after regaining independence of Latvia in 1991, I used communication methods usually. Then I'm in this time again I sticked with it, and it was actor network theory. I like it because it helps me to visualize whole situation, and this visualization helps me to see actually how each of the actors of participants in this communication are important, in a sense, what is the effort of them, because sometimes while we are in the event or in the process, we don't see or don't notice where the main ideas come from, or who helps to deliver them to the proper actor again, so that they can be expressed further on, or again like saved as evidence. So yeah, I used this actor network theory to describe this situation and see how actually it looked like, and what was the role of each of the actors, and how whole process managed to reach this target to create the article. For it, unfortunately or luckily, it's just how it is, that all those resources I had were mainly my experience and my correspondence with journalists and representatives of museums. And this theory allows me to use my diary notes as well. And of course, like other related materials, mainly from museums, because actually currently according Latvian diaspora in Russia, most research are done about the maintenance of the language and ethnographical researches. There are not so many about communication and how the relationship between Siberian Latvians, what we consider every citizen of Russia who lives in Siberia and considers him at least partly belonging to Latvia, how they actually collaborate, or what are their relationships, because officially there are not so many organizations who have information about it, but unofficially, again, you know that some of them are very well informed about what is happening in other side, etc. So to help to make a network, every activity is considered as a data, I just counted activities in a chronological order to go through the whole process. It lasted around 2 months, like that, so that just to chase actually which actors involved and how often. So the activities kind of shows that the main actors are journalist and teacher. Again, like museums are essential parts of the process. Otherwise, the article wouldn't come out like so good as it was in the end, or wouldn't give up proper information. And from the teacher's perspective, I remember that at the beginning, especially, I was very kind of aware and a bit afraid how it's suddenly going to be like to talk in Russia about exiled people in Russia, but it was amazing that, however, we found this kind of middle way, not lying, not kind of ignoring the fact that they were exiled there, that they appeared there without any reason, that they were actually struggling there. But of course, like, we didn't mention a lot political issues, definitely not, because probably that kind of conversation wouldn't be possible, even in local media, because the thought that Siberian media, you probably can't get it in Moscow, for example. And that's one of the pluses from one side, that in Siberia you kind of can feel a bit more open and free regarding expressing your political views and attitudes. In the same time, just when you reach certain level of publicity, you are kind of shut down, and that's it. And this is actually the moment where we can look to the network and see why exactly Latvian Museum was very crucial and important, because although they think that Melanie Vanaga and her novels are heritage of Siberia as well, there were no basically evidences about it. We didn't look in archives, since journalists told that she kind of haven't found anything there. I didn't check, but I went to Tuesday to the place where Melanie Vanaga lived, to that museum, to look for evidences in that museum, and actually, like, this was the picture from the Tuesday Museum, and there were only few articles as evidence about that time in general, and and it is very typical for Siberia that, so actually all this history is not even 100 years ago. There are nearly none of evidences left from that time. Like when you want to go and look for the camp where your grandparents maybe lived, and you know that they were working within a cows or within a bees, you can't find those houses anymore because they are ruined and there is just forest or fields. So no evidence is in the same actually in the museum. So and in that moment, a Latvian museum was the only resource where we had a lot of evidences, where we had the photos, where we had her diaries. And since as a Latvian teacher, I was able to communicate with them in Latvian, and I was able to tell the reason why I want those photos, and they trust me. They shared those photos with journalists as well afterwards, because there is a risk when opposite sides just ask the materials. They are not the people are very kind of afraid and distant at the beginning, and you need like connection person who in some way translates, not in a language-wise, but attitude-wise, translates the purpose of the idea why we are doing this thing. And it is very important, like, to have someone who not directly tells that I need the photos, but who explains that we are willing to tell about Latvians as Siberia, we are willing to popularize, and we actually are willing to collaborate and to share this history, because though it is painful history and it always will remain painful history, today it's probably important to learn to forgive, in my opinion at least, and actually to learn from this history, because not only this book shows the evidence, but the nature there and the people in Siberia who still are alive there, and you can meet them there, gives you a great lesson how strong people can be, and that only if you are caring and if you put the common human values above the nationality, you can survive in really harsh situations, as was that one. Like that. And in the end, in the network, you can see that Latvian language teacher as an actor has the biggest bubble regarding the size. And it is how to tell better. Basically, it is not about that, like, as a teacher, I should be proud about what I did. I'm actually grateful that I was able to be in this role there, but it was, it more tells about the function of Latvian teacher. If previously Christina told about the role of diaspora in abroad, that they actually can be quite important regarding state affairs, then in this case, a Latvian teacher as well can be a tool used so more useful as it currently is, maybe. Because if, like, diaspora teachers' main task is to go there and help local Latvians, like diaspora Latvians, maintain their ethnic culture and language, it is definitely not the only thing they can do, and maybe even more productive is if they facilitate collaboration between different actors, because they have usually different experience, they have different language skills, and in this case they have more modern skills in the sense of digital literacy and use of it, how it can be used like that. And like, what are the outcomes of all of that? Shortly. First of all, of course, that there are certain circumstances how this network is actually possible, that not only it's definitely not possible, like, to collaborate in the same way in all the diasporas, and even it's sooner, like, probably other diasporas might be, as we heard, more successful again, like, but we have to count on the situation and environment where diaspora is located and the historical background, how it got there. However, However, I really, the lesson, what I learned, most of it, and I didn't notice it before, that some diaspora experience actually really learns you to be able to put like common human values up to national ones. And there are moments and times when maybe you can, in the end, in a long term, gain more within that than being just about your national idea. And of course, there are always the future next research topics possible, to which direction to move. And I'm currently not sure whether I will do any of them, or maybe someday, because like my researches are more linked usually with the current situations. When I approach them, then I just like to look back to it through some academical form and field. And I'm glad if I can leave that kind of evidence about actually present time, which is not considered history yet, but will be history in 5 years. Since I have heard from historians that history is everything what is 10 years old at least. But finishing this short case study regarding my experience, I just want to finish with sentences about how this case study influenced me as an individual, that I changed my attitude towards Russian journalists per se, in the sense that it was my first time when I had positive collaboration with them, without being ironically or skeptical about each other's history. And it was, for me, it was very important, and it gave me the idea that time is changing, and it is important that society in Latvia as well remembers all the history and definitely honors it, but that we began to forgive, and that we began to look for forgiveness in a sense, and the lessons what we can learn from it, not only being a sorrow of that what I was presented while I was in Latvia mostly. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now questions and comments.
No.
I have one question. There in Siberia, there are, so to say, different layers of Latvians living. Ones are those who have traveled to gain land already during the Russian Empire. Others are those who stayed there
as refugees from First World War, yes, and
also,
then
and from deportations, and others who went. How these so-called layers? How do they act together, or do they
act
something?
At all?
Could you characterize?
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't maybe gave the
experience.
introduction regarding whole Latvian Siberian society in general, just because I didn't want to pay so much attention to it. But historically, first of all, yes, there are several waves how Latvians got to Siberia, not only to Siberia, but to Russian Empire at whole. And I first of all stick with Siberia region because they are too diverse, and it's partly because of huge location and the climate changes, and each region has, however, different situation how they are able to collaborate and actually communicate together. While time has done its job as well, and most of them are extinct anyway right now. And Krasnoyarsk is specifically really mostly exiled Latvians, since Latvians, as Estonians or Lithuanians or Polish or Germans reached Siberia both in 41 and 49. And however, there are still this first wave, next generations, and this is challenging for them as well. And again, where the Latvian teacher role is partly crucial, because at certain point you are the one who forms the attitude regarding deportations, since those who arrived in Siberia during Imperia, they even don't know what does it mean independent country as such, because they didn't cross the border at all. They just went to free land. So for them, it actually was quite offending when Latvia established independence. So suddenly there was the border, and they felt like they have thrown out of it. So they were separated by Latvia. That's how their mind, that's what their memories are about it. And currently, since diaspora groups remain smaller and smaller, then the situation is so that they have learned to celebrate Independence Day, but you can see that only for exiled Latvians, those are really real emotions, because you actually can't learn those things. You can learn with your brain, but you can't learn with your heart, I guess. And regarding the traditions, again, that's something common for them, but that's very interesting that usually deported Latvians are not so fond with traditions. For them, more political issues are important, and they are actually quite distant and silent, since they have had a lot of comments about us asking why they didn't go back, etc. Since again, there were not understanding in society and in the public environment about what does it mean to go back from Soviet country back to independent Latvia. And there were actually quite huge wave who returned to Latvia during Soviet times, still in 70s. And I would say they were the last wave who managed to adapt back in Latvia, while still the systems were very similar, and they managed to do it. And the rest of that afterwards, only a few individuals. Okay, I already got farther away from your question, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the answer.
Welcome.
Yeah, the idea is that the first waves, there are, we must not hope they will sometimes return to Latvia. They are just local Latvian-speaking people. Thank you very much for the presentation. I was in Krasnoyarsk region, but not in the Krasnoyarsk, but in Achinsk for 2 weeks in a Latgalian-speaking Latvian neighborhood. They spoke only Latgalian, so I studied Latgalian much.
Yeah, but that's the thing. This is you are one of the representatives. What I told that current researches are mainly made only about the language and ethnography.
Yeah.
That there are no other type of researches.
Yes, and it's very, very good that you step this your field of research, sociology, or not?
Welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And unfortunately, no more time for questions. And let's keep the other questions to the next break. Thank you, Liana. And we don't have here Ilya Lotkin, but very fortunately we have here Krish Kapenieks. So, and now we can hear about the Latvian community in Lithuania. Please, Krish.
Even not about the whole Latvian community in Lithuania, but about one very specific part of it. So how can I make full screen? Or it works. Yeah. I'm very happy and proud to be here at so many diaspora researchers. I am a historian from Riga, Latvia, and my research topic is Latvian-speaking communities both in Lithuania and former Eastern Prussia. Šventoji is a place in Lithuania, not far from Lithuanian border. And Baltic. So to speak in general, Baltic diaspora communities in Baltic countries themselves are not very researched, and the specific position of them lies in their very closeness to their ethnic fatherland. Sometimes very hundreds or just tens of kilometers, sometimes even just some hundreds of meters across the state border with Latvia. Latvian diaspora in Lithuania has deep historical roots, and Latvians in northern Lithuania has the longer history among Latvian diaspora in Lithuania. Partly they migrated from territory of nowadays Latvia, or then it was Kurland or Livland or Livonia in 18th, 19th century. Partly they could be treated as indigenous population. One of the last ones are Latvian community of Šventoji, in Latvian Sventāja, a rural community at the Baltic Sea, close to the border of Latvia. The territory of Šventoji, former used also name Sventa, or in Latvian Sventāja. It's a Koronian place name that means the holy river. That in standard Latvian would be named Svētupe, the holy river. There are some other Svētupe in Latvia and another river, Šventoji, in Lithuania too. It was a part of ancient Koronia, inhabited by medieval Koronian people. It is a territory that in 13th century the roots went so very deep back in the history. You see at the western coast, where is the land Duvzare, or land that stretches in two directions. The two branches, it means in the very south is the river with the mouth in the Baltic Sea. It's Šventoji River. It was included in Livonian Confederation in the second half of 13th century at first, but then transferred to the Teutonic Order in 14th century. The territory was devastated in the war between the Teutonic Order in Lithuania, and a major part of the population were killed or escaped to more peaceful lands. In 1422, the peace treaty of Melno between the Teutonic Order and Lithuania was signed, and in 1426 the boundary between Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Livonia was demarcated. So in the region of Šventoji, the boundary went along the Šventoji River, leaving lands north from the lower reaches of the river Šventoji, or the right bank of the river Šventoji, having an eye to the sea, to the west, to the Livonia, while the south from the river, or the left bank, to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. You see in this map of Livonia, it is Livonia nowadays, Latvian and Estonian territory, and the very, very southwest, this corner, there is the territory I speak about. Thus, to Lithuania, an approach to the Baltic Sea was Lithuania got an approach to the Baltic Sea. It had not had until that moment. And this political border was stable for the next 370 years. From 1560 to 1609, the territory north from the Šventoji was pledged to the Duchy of Prussia, but in 1609 it was transferred to the Duchy of Kurland. Duchy of Kurland was a successor state of Livonia and a vassal of Poland-Lithuania. The population, especially along the coastline, stayed Curonian, and it was gradually Lettonized in the 15th, 17th century. The population was mainly fishermen and peasants. There are some different opinions how much medieval Curonian language differed from modern Latvian language, and when this shift from Curonian to Latvian language occurred. Latvians of Šventoji were evangelical Lutherans by confession that also separated them from Lithuanians of the region who were Catholics. The river Šventoji was a border river for centuries, not far from its mouth. The mouth still changed during time a bit. Two Šventoji villages at the mouth developed, one in Livonia on the north coast, north bank, and then in Kurland, and another village of Šventoji in Lithuania, the southern bank. So it was until the third partition of Poland-Lithuania, who occurred in 1795, and Lithuania, Kurland, including Šventoji region, was annexed by Russian Empire. So I want you to draw your attention at this Baltic Sea coast line, and in the green color is the coastline on which villages of Koronian or later Latvian villages are documented. It is some mid of 17th century, and it is documented by documents and by chronicles, by the Chronicle of Einhorn, who wrote that Latvian fishermen live along the sea coast even until Danzig or Gdańsk, because fishermen were their job, and the people in the inside of the land did not like to do fishing. It seemed dangerous or for them, or they can't do this job. But Koronians were good fishermen, though they colonized many places in the nowadays Lithuania and former East Prussia, now Kaliningrad region, and even further. So these Latvian-speaking people on the Koronian Spit, it's another theme yet. So Lithuania and its vassal Kurland, after the third partition of Poland, Lithuania were annexed by Russian Empire in 1795. The right bank of Šventoji river became part of the governorate of Kurland, the left bank part of the governorate of Vilnius. As from the left bank of Šventoji river, there was a distance about 20 kilometers until the border with the kingdom of Prussia. It's the place near Klaipėda. Nowadays, Nemirseta. Tsar's government decided to transfer it to the governorate of Kurland in 1819 with an intention to unite the maritime customs offices of both governorates, and so made just one maritime customs of the Kurland governorate. Also the territory from the left bank of Šventoji to the Prussian border to the Nemirseta is including the town of Palanga, rather well-known town in Lithuania. Palanga was included in the Gruobiņa district of the governorate of Kurland. In 1915, during World War I, both the territories of Lithuania and Kurland were occupied by the army of German Empire that saved the previous administrative division. Accordingly, in 16th February and 18th November 1918, Lithuania and Latvia proclaimed their independence, while the German occupation continued even after Germany was defeated in the World War I, because Western Allies ordered German army to stay in the occupied territories of former Russian Empire because of Russian Bolshevik threats from the east. So the young Republic of Latvia started to develop their administration structures along the German ones. So the whole Grobiņa district, including Šventoji and Palanga then, was ruled by administration of Latvian Republic from 1918. In fact, since March 1919, first Latvian offices were constructed there up to the 31st March 1921. Although Lithuanians made some attempts to seize Palanga region during this period, they were not successful because Latvia agreed to solve the question of belonging of Palanga region only by negotiations that would affect the whole future Latvian-Lithuanian border. The negotiations on interstate border between Latvia and Lithuania were quite long, almost 2 years, and Palanga region was demanded by Latvia as a historical Lithuanian land and the only possible approach to the sea. Klaipėda was not part of Lithuania at that time. Latvians constituted the majority of the population of the northern part of this territory, around Šventoji village. They wrote petitions to the government of Latvia and the Border Demarcation Commission, led by a British professor James Young Simpson, and requested Šventoji should stay within Latvia. The boundary was drawn finally in March 1921, still leaving Šventoji in Lithuania. Even another territory that had never been in Lithuania before 1795, the Būtiņi village, now Būtiņi village is known as Būtinge, and in our century is more well known by its oil terminal on the very northwest of Lithuania. It is on the right bank, so to say, on the Livonian bank of the Šventoji river. It was a part of Rucava parish of Grobiņa, now already renamed to Liepāja district, inhabited only by Latvians, was transferred to Lithuania because of idea to make a harbor in the mouth of Šventoji river. Latvians of Šventoji and Būtinge who stayed in Lithuania in such a way formed a specific Latvian diaspora group. Latvians of Šventoji and Būtinge became diaspora not because of emigration from Latvia, but because of boundary changes. Latvians made the majority of the territory until the first half of the 20th century. After that, the percentage of Latvians in Šventoji started to decrease. Migration of Lithuanians to the territory increased. Teaching of the Latvian language at schools was not solved successfully despite the efforts of the Latvian embassy in Lithuania and then the bilateral minority school convention. Many Latvians moved to Latvia after 1921, and the process continued during Soviet occupation after World War II. Many people from Šventoji live in Liepāja until now. There are several villages with an important Latvian percentage. In the region, percentage of Latvians decreases in direction from north to south, and it decreases also chronologically since 1921, comparing different tens of years. Villages with important Latvian percentage was and until now is Būtinge, Šventoji, Sventāja, Monciške, Manciške, Palibģirei, Palibģiri, Užkanave, Vanagupe. These are with a certain large percentage of Latvian minorities after 1921. As Latvian historian Ilmārs Mešs has researched, there were Latvian majority in 1922 in these villages. Palipgirai village was distracted because of building of the Palanga airport. Its inhabitants were transferred to other villages. Palanga was an ancient health resort of the region, and other mentioned villages between Palanga and Latvian border was joined to Palanga in 1970s, gaining a 19 kilometers long health resort town along the coast. Although its parts, former fishermen villages, stand in quite long distances between each other, and therefore some of them, for example, Šventoji, had saved a strong local identity. Some revival of the community started in 1990s. The Koronian Society of Šventoji, Sventājas Kuršu biedrība, was founded in 1993. That continued to preserve old traditions, to popularize local folklore, especially songs. There are rich authentic folklore preserved in Šventoji Latvian community. Until nowadays, several public projects supporting Latvian identity in Šventoji were promoted. During last years, a CD with sound and video, Pavējama es dziedāju Sventājas dziesmas, songs of Šventoji, with local folklore gathered by folklorists from Latvia, was published in 2010. A creative documentary movie, Vēju žeme, Land of Wind, shot by Lithuanian team, appeared in 2016 by regisseur Ernestas Samsonas and producer Victoria Jonkuta, and was demonstrated in Lithuania, both in Lithuania and Latvia, and in Estonia, Tartu University too on the March, but I miss this this date, missed. Mikkelis, Šventoji local history and enthusiast Mikkelis Balčus has published a book in Lithuania telling to Lithuanian readers about the Latvian factor in Šventoji history and traditions. How much the time is? I'm sorry. Couple, yeah. So I would say the most important things. The community is still rather strong. The Latvian language and life art has preserved in families, although the support from Latvia is not large. Šventoji Latvians has a Latvian ethnic identity. Sometimes, and some of them call themselves Koronians or Kurši Kursinieki. Some claim that Lithuanians are interested in preserving their Koronian, not Latvian identity, but I'm not sure about it. I would say that Šventoji Latvian identity is not national, with Latvia as a state and political, like exile communities in Western countries, because the Latvians of Šventoji had lived in the Republic of Latvia too short time, but also pre-national, and they identify themselves with their ethnicity. The latter is proved by large importance of local traditions, ethnical Lutheran religion, family ties, and community consciousness that are still strong in Šventoji. Okay, thank you. Have you some questions, maybe?
We have time at least for one question, please. If not at the moment, then during the lunchtime. Thank you, Krish.
Of course. Thank you.
And let's move further. And our next speaker is coming from Tartu. Anu Korb, and she's going to speak about the Estonians or Estonian community in Siberia after the restoration of the independence of Estonia.
Hello, everybody. My workplace is Estonian Folklore Archive, and I have studied Siberia Estonian communities more than 20 years for today. With the restoration of the Republic of Estonia in the 1991, Estonians living in Siberia and elsewhere in Russia suddenly became so-called foreign Estonians, despite having lived before as Estonians in their homeland in the Soviet Union. The majority of Estonians in Siberia are the descendants of Estonians who emigrated upon the cohesion of Imperial Russian central government in the final decade of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century, when Estonia was part of Imperial Russia. Since Estonians from one region settled close to each other, Estonian language and culture survived for a long time in this foreign environment. Settlements that were established yet earlier were made up of people deported to Siberia by the Russian imperial government. Lutheran peoples, Estonian among them, lived in these settlements side by side. As a result of restoration of Estonia as an independent state in 1918, Estonians in Siberia became isolated from their homeland. In the 1920s and 30s, all Estonian communities in Siberia suffered in the political and economical turmoil. The Second World War, which reached the territory of the Soviet Union in summer 1941, took the men from the villages to war, and women and children left to fend for the villages. The post-war period, Estonians in Siberia started to leave the Siberian villages, and as a result, the smaller villages disappeared, and others saw a steady increase of non-Estonian population. Since Estonia was occupied by the Soviet Union, Estonians repatriated to the annexed homeland in great numbers, despite the considerable complexity of living the Siberian villages at the time. During and after the Second World War, Estonians in Siberia were also transferred to Estonia by the Soviet and party functionaries, resulting in tension with Estonians in homeland and damaging the reputation of Russia's Estonians for decades to come. In general terms, the remigration of Siberia's Estonians can be compared to the tentative waves of immigration to Estonia. The migration inflow to Estonia became most intense immediately after the Second World War. Immigration decreased concurrently with Estonia becoming an independent country. Since 1991, following the restoration of Republic of Estonia, the Estonian communities in Siberia had been the focus of collecting and research at the Estonian Folklore Archives, with 16 field trips carried out in the period of 1991 to 2013. Folklorists, of course, cannot take credit for being the first to investigate Estonian living in Siberia, because historians, ethnologists, and linguists have worked in several Siberian villages before. At the same time, the fieldwork of the Estonian folklore archives can be regarded as one of the most systematic ones. We have tried to locate all the possible Estonian communities and work in these communities. According to the 1989 census of Russia, there were 17,000 Estonians living in Siberia. That includes Estonians living in large cities, in Russian villages, and elsewhere. In the course of the fieldwork in the 1990s, we found in the Siberian rural areas from Omsk Oblast to Krasnoyarsk Krai about 40 Estonian communities with a population ranging between 25 and 300, with the majority of population having reached a respectable age. Relatively few Estonian-speaking villages were left, with Estonians generally constituting just one ethnic segment of a multi-ethnic village. In the last decades of the 20th century, only a few villages had remained more or less completely Estonian. The peripheral location is characteristic of all the villages with a more or less Estonian-speaking population. The use of mother tongue by the villages did not seem to depend on the ties with homeland Estonia. For instance, the Estonians of the village of Verni-Suetuk maintained close contacts with Estonia, whereas Estonians in Nikolaevka did not. By the present day, the number of the Estonian communities in Siberia has considerably decreased. In the early days, following the reinstancing of Republic of Estonia, the final decade of the 20th century, the interest of the Estonian general public towards Estonians living in Siberia was insignificant. I realized that Estonians at home know very little about the history of Siberia's Estonians. They either automatically view them as staunch supporters of the Soviet regime or narrowly identify Estonians in Siberia as those deported from Estonia in the 1940s. In the 1990s, Estonians in Siberia were eagerly interested in what was happening in Estonia. So we folklorists were regarded both as representatives of Estonia and a direct link to the relatives living in Estonia. With a surge in the ethnic awareness of the minority peoples living in the Russian Federation in the late 1980s, the self-perception of Estonians in Siberia had changed, and the younger generation had developed interest in their roots. More active people searched archives for information about the village history, the repressed relatives, and marked the location of the former village sites. Some village museums were founded, for example, in Beryozovka, Zolotoy Haidak. The regional newspapers in Siberia started to publish an increasing number of articles of the life and situation of compactly living ethnic minorities. The Estonian communities also captured the journalist attention. After the introduction of the visa regime between the Republic of Estonia and the Russian Federation, Estonians living in Siberia felt cut off from their relatives in homeland with whom they used to keep in touch and visit one another, owing to the economic regression and the complicated visa process. Because of economically difficult times, many people struggled and could not afford longer travels. In the Estonian villages in Siberia, cooperatives, which replaced former collective and state farms, offered some employment for a meager salary to only part of the population in the working age. In these years, it took months to get paid. The 60 or more years of collective farming had largely destroyed private enterprise. Villages with an aging population and the fear for new repressions against families instilled by previous generations were not favorable towards entrepreneurship either. However, some people had the courage to choose a form of individual holding, establishing private shops, offering transport services, etc. Masses of people worked at long-distance jobs. Men left for months to work in the Russian far north, Norilsk-Kamchatka. In this decade, it was very common that many generations of a family lived off their own household. Agricultural produce was often sent to larger cities to support relatives living there. Remaining in the sphere of influence of the Russian media, Estonians in Siberia were nearly completely disconnected from information about Estonia. In the condition of economic regression, correspondence and phone communication between Estonia and Siberia was disrupted almost completely for a while, and there was no internet access at the time. Estonians in Siberia were worried about their children or other relatives who were living in Estonia. Few families from Estonian villages in Siberia who had repatriated to Estonia returned to Siberia. Emigration to Finland and especially Germany became acutely topical in Russia following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Lutherans living in Siberia, Estonians, Latvians, Germans, and Finns had lived close to each other ever since the founding of the settlements, partly in villages of mixed ethnicity. In the 1990s, Germany offered effective assistance to expatriates wishing to return to Germany. In Siberia, people saw us folklorists as representatives of the state of Estonia and inquired from us why Estonia, unlike Germany, did not invite its former citizens to return. The situation are not entirely comparable because Estonians who wished to return to homeland from Siberia during the Soviet period generally did so, whereas Germans in Siberia did not have free access to the historical homeland at this time. In the 1990s, Estonians in Siberia fell also into cultural isolation. It became impossible to subscribe to Estonian newspapers, magazines, and books. In the post-war Soviet period, anyone who wished so, among others, the village libraries in Siberia could freely subscribe to newspapers and magazines published in Estonia. In the Soviet years, fostering ethnic culture was in a way facilitated by district-wide or even province-wide folklore festivals and events celebrating the friendship of nations. Regardless of the political coloring, as at these events, singing songs of different peoples in the ethnic language was obligatory. Occasionally also meetings of Estonians from the regions, villages were held. In the 1990s, folk ensembles were still active in 7 villages. The majority of members of these folk groups, however, were already in advanced age. In the 1990s, many Estonian villages in Siberia celebrated the centenary of the foundation of the villages, and the celebrations usually help to capture the attention of the local administration and receive financial support to organize the events. Unfortunately, representatives of Estonia were usually not present at these celebrations. At the turn of the century, and after that, Estonians in homeland and the Estonian embassy in Moscow started to take more notice of the compatriots in Siberia. Educational and cultural exchange intensified as well, with the financial support of the Ministry of Science and Education in Estonia and the Integration Foundation, organizing language and culture camps in Estonia for children. For Estonian descendants living in Russia was started in 2000. Since 1992, young people from Finno-Ugric minorities have had the chance to study in Estonian higher educational schools with the support of the government of Estonia, whereas the state-financed study programs targeted at Estonians living in Russia were initiated 10 years later. Since 2002, a student scholarship of the Compatriots program is granted to an Estonian student living in the former territory of the Soviet Union for study in a higher educational institution in Estonia. A teacher of Estonian language and culture was sent from Estonia to Vernis-Võetuk. The second teacher, Airi Lauri, got married there and still lives in the Estonian village. Airi teaches next to English also Estonian language at school, but unfortunately she cannot be regarded as an upholder of Estonian language and culture in the village. Certainly, the village of Vernis-Võetuk, which at first was known as Finnish settlements, but nowadays it is now known as largest Estonian settlement in Siberia, received more attention from Estonians in homeland compared to other villages in Siberia in these years. There is a brass band, the oldest of the area and the oldest existing Lutheran church building in the village. In the 1990s, the church of Võetuk, which had been used as grain storage and clubhouse, in the meantime was re-established as an ecclesiastic building. Once or twice a year, pastor from Estonia visits the congregations. In 2007, the congregation was transferred under the Ingrian Evangelical Lutheran Church. At the same time, the support of Estonia would not reach all the Estonian communities in Siberia. For example, the village of Nikolaevka in Novosibirsk Oblast with immigrants from the Võru district. The contacts between the villages and Estonia were very infrequent. The villages spoke to each other in the local Võru dialect. In 1999, the Russian language elementary school had 11 students. In 2000, the village school of Nikolaevka was closed. The villages led the traditional village life, leaving the village on rare occasions. the older people were optimistic about the future of the home village. We will be gone, but the village will remain. The reality is that the population has decreased by 2/3 in the past 20 years. Many former Estonian settlements have turned into multi-ethnic and cultural villages in which Estonians from an ethnic minority. In some villages, for example in Berezovka, Tomsk Oblast, Estonians sense that their culture is under threat and they try to revive the culture and traditions. A village museum was established there, and there is a secondary school in the village with the Estonian language and culture group which was active in 1996 to 99, but was discontinued for economic reasons. In 1996, the Estonian Culture Center was founded in the village, while it is not an officially registered ethnic society. It operates similarity of official ethnic societies under the auspice of the Tomsk Center of Folk Creation. The number of people using Estonian language in a daily basis is diminishing, and very likely we can soon talk about the Russian-speaking Estonian community in the village. From the beginning of the 21st century, the cultural exchange between Estonia and Estonian communities in Siberia has intensified as well, with Estonian cultural days held in Tomsk, the Estonian Drama Theatre visiting Krasnoyarsk, etc. I have personally tried to contribute by sending to the Estonian villages in Siberia publications and copies of the material collected from them. With the slightly improving economic situation, the visits of relatives from Estonia to Siberia have become more frequent. Estonians traveling in the region who have no relatives in Siberia have started to visit Estonian villages in Siberia as part of the road trip. In recent years, the setos in Estonia communicate actively with setos in Siberia. Unfortunately, the population of Estonian villages in Siberia is rapidly decreasing and aging, with practically no newcomers in the villages. There are new opportunities in Krasnoyarsk, as an Estonian society was founded there, the only Estonian society in Siberia. Thus, FA was established in 1992. When the Estonian Society celebrated the 20th anniversary, I participated in the festivities with my colleague Andreas Kalkun. By now, the Estonian Society has also celebrated the 25th anniversary. This year, in May, the Estonian Cultural Days were held in Krasnoyarsk as part of the centenary program Estonia 100. It seems to me that the trips to collect folklore among Estonians in Siberia were particularly important following the restoration of independence in Estonia, the final decade of the 20th century. We managed to record unique material, but perhaps even more important were the long-lasting relations that we managed to establish between Estonians in homeland and in Siberia. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. Now questions. Oh. Okay. First of all here, and then I will move to you.
I have a question about Estonians and about Setos. Are they treated in statistics separate or in self-perception also, like is Latvians and Latgalians in Siberia are often treated separate in censuses and also in self-perception? How is it with Estonians and Setos?
It have been so and so. Some, yeah, some they have. It's not ma ei oska öelda, et mõnikord ühtemoodi, mõnikord teistmoodi. It's not the different.
Yeah, because in Russian censuses since 1920s, Latgalians is an separate ethnicity. Is Seto also, or Seto is not?
Seto also. In the last few census.
Thank you. And how many Setos are there in Russia?
Not
100,
not
maybe.
Very 200 or so.
Thank you.
Okay. Please raise up your hand. Just hold a second. Yeah.
Vanasti oli seal Ülemsöötukis eesti keele õpetaja ja siis vahepeal ei olnud. Kas nüüd on jälle üks kord aastas, et üks õpetaja läheb sinna eesti keelt õpetama?
Õpetaja on seal kogu aeg alates 2000. aastast. Üks tuli ära ja teine jäi elama sinna.
Ja teine küsimus, kui ikka vähem ja vähem eestlasi elab seal nüüd, kas see on sellepärast, et nad kolivad mujale või lihtsalt, et vanemad surevad ära?
Jah, vanemad. Külad on vanemaid inimesi on külades palju.
Nii et need külad vähenevad sellepärast, et inimesed kolivad mujale, mitte et vanemad inimesed surevad ära?
No mõlemad
põhjused. Aitäh.
Ma ei tea, kas küsid eesti keeles või inglise keeles. Okay, it's maybe the question is a bit different. I'd like to know about the local authorities. How they relate to Estonian population or Estonian villages there, and is it and has it changed from the 90s? Ma tahaks küsida tegelikult kohaliku võimu kohta, kuidas nad suhtuvad nagu Eestisse.
They know Estonians has had that Estonians are hard workers. It's positive, but it's differently. It may be, but in local administration, it's not the conflicts. With local authorities, they have no conflicts. It seems.
I have two questions, two short questions. Number one, maybe you spoke about it and I didn't get it. When Estonians were deported to Siberia in 1941, have they been separated from those already living there, or were they put together? And question number two, you spoke about the Russian-German population in Siberia and elsewhere. And nowadays in Germany, we often have the impression that the Russian Germans are more Russian than German. They watch Russia Today, and many of them watch Russia Today and are influenced by Russian propaganda. And I would like to know if there are the same problems with Estonians living in Siberia and now living in Estonia. Thank you.
These who were deported in 1940s, they lived separately. They don't live these villages. But in Berezovka, in one Estonian village, lived deported Latvians. But the authorities don't want to put the Estonian from Estonia, these Estonian villages. But in 1990s, many Germans immigrated to Germany. And in 1990s, everyone who had German mothers and something, they want to go to Germany. Almost everyone. Some villages where German lived, Estonian lives in the same village, in Svetnopol and Omsk Oblast. For example, there was German region in 1990s in Russia, and they helped them very much to go Germany, and in the place in Siberia also, who wanted to stay in Siberia, they helped very much, give him financial help.
Okay, thank you very much. It was one of the comments. It's at certain points it felt like I could just change Estonians to Latvian, and it's the same history regarding Siberia. Mm-hmm. And thank you for the question, because I had the same question regarding deported and all the previously arrived Estonians, because I know that Latvians only met in 90s when they began to establish those associations after collapse of Soviet Unions. So probably it was similar with Estonians as well, was it? Mm-hmm. And the question, what else I had about this, that you mentioned that only now, like right now, only like embassy and Estonians are more interested to get some contact with Siberian Estonians. What might be the reason why only right now, not previously?
It was first 10 years. It was very difficult. I think in Estonia there were many other problems, and they couldn't reach to Siberian Estonians at first. After that, it's changed.
Why was it that Estonians went to Siberia in the 19th century? Did they decide to go there themselves, or did the Tsar and the Tsarist officials decide that they had to be moved? In which case, what was the reason for moving them?
They want to become landowners. But of course it was the government behind this process.
They thought they were pioneers, like Americans moving west to get new land in America. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen to either of them. Well, we can have a new argument now over lunch.
Okay. One last question. Yeah.
Thank you. So I would like to ask one more question about deported Estonians and so-called old Estonians. you showed a figure about the population, the numbers. So there was like, before the Second World War, there was like 30-something thousand. And then around 80s, 90s, there was like 20-something thousand. But what about those people who were deported there? Like, my assumption is that the number of like Estonians would decrease due to the deportation, but the numbers didn't show it at all. So were those numbers only for those who went there, like voluntarily to get land? Or did those numbers include also those who were deported?
Yeah, it covers all.
All, okay,
All.
Because I would expect a jump in numbers, because if there was like wagons full of people who were sent there, so like it doesn't make so much sense in terms of numbers. It's just like, it's interesting trend of like, in terms of statistics.
No.
Thank you.
I don't know how.
I think that Anu will explain it in person during the lunchtime, but there is some proper explanations behind this. So, thank you, Anu, once again.
Ei oska sitä välja.
And our last speaker in this session is Jolanta Budriuniene from Lithuania, and she's going to speak about the educational aspect of emigration in past and present.
It will appear, but I would like to come back to the first. Yeah. So, dear all, this is, as Birgit mentioned, the last presentation. It will be very practical presentation about the one of the projects that we implemented in our library, and it is how it's possible to integrate the results of research topics into the educational process. But starting from the beginning. Over the past decades, a certain redefinition of information field forces and review of a library's position in a public field took place. It's undoubtedly related to the opportunities offered by information technologies by opening the big part of digitized content of documentary heritage. Obviously, in order to stay the equivalent players at the present time, libraries must not only ensure the provision of the documentary heritage content or information about it to a consumer, but also themselves have to put enough work and intellectual activity to deliver the content to the user's expectation. So, today we are talking about the library as the documentary heritage preserver, about library as a document heritage researcher, an organizer and implementer of dissemination of documentary heritage, and as mediator between the content of documentary heritage and its researchers. In this paper, I want to present library as an organizer and implementer of one of very important form of disseminations, its educational role. It's obvious that this activity is very closely related to other I mentioned before. The involvement of libraries in educational activities, and in particular in the education supplemented non-formal and informal education of students, it's relatively new, with many interpretations about the concept of education as phenomenon and the expression of its content. At the National Library, at our library, we have a Department of Children and Youth, and that this department have been working for a long time, but their activities early were mostly related to promoting of reading. And the department that I represent, it's documentary heritage research department. We're trying to, as I mentioned, to implement the research results into different forms of dissemination. So, as I mentioned, the report will present the educational project Conversation about Immigration, which is carried of our library and was implemented for 3 years in different regions of Lithuania. We implemented this project together with Vytautas Magnus University researchers, historians, and also with non-government organization Global Lithuanian Leaders, and with a great number of gymnasium as well. So, what is demand of the project? In the recent years, the problem of immigration is revealed not only in Lithuania. We observe the process of this phenomenon in both neighboring countries and in global context as well. The question is, how much immigration issues are known to young people? Strategic long-term documents in the field of education in our country emphasize also the development of citizenship and national identity as one of the main educational requirements. So, how much immigration issues are important for their implementation, whether or not is taken into account in practice? The analysis was based on the secondary school educational documents of our countries, revealed that the history of the second part of 19th century and the 20th century of Lithuanian immigration is not attended into a school process. Only the fragmentary discussions of later immigration waves is noticed. This also was confirmed by the results of interview with teachers. Obviously, the absence of such a coherent concept of immigration phenomena hinders the perception and proper assessment to these current processes. Therefore, on other side, negative opinion about immigration, especially about nowadays immigrants, is often formulated maybe for this reason. So, the aim of our project was organizing creativity, promoting series of activities for young people, seeking to broaden their knowledge about immigration process and thus contribute to the development of youth citizenship and the fostering of national self-awareness. The main goals. Based on the methodology developed by researchers of National Library of Lithuania, organize the training for the teachers and librarians involved in the project and prepare them for the implementation of the project. Also organizing creativity training, improve the knowledge of project participants about immigration as a process of the history and present Lithuania. Based on the material about immigrants of today, collecting during the project participants' individual activities, prepare students' debates, consolidating their concept about the migration process of citizens of today's Republic of Lithuania. And one more task to raise the target audience and inform stakeholders about the project, develop the dissemination of the project results as well. Project activities. Extension of knowledge for the students participating in the project on the process of Lithuanian immigration history. As I mentioned, we collaborated with the historians, researchers from Vytautas Magnus University, and we had a series of lectures for students on the history of Lithuanian migration. Extension of knowledge of contemporary migration also was very important. And there we work in a little bit another way. We organized workshops and we prepared the method of oral history or method of interview and presented them for children, and they worked with this method individually to find interviews with immigrants. One more task is dissemination of success stories. Dissemination of success stories, events telling about the integration of returning immigrants and live samples of citizens of Lithuania working in the project implementing areas. Discussion on this topic in gymnasia. This was one little bit. And process of interview was screening of people who can participate in the personal interview, migration experiences, interviewing them, later handling systematization, analysis of information that obtained during interviews, and later workshops preparing for the debates by presenting the principles of this method and using the results of interview that were prepared by students personally. And the last stage was public debate among high school students about immigration. And still in process is preparing of scientific, sociological article based on this analysis of completed survey. During the whole project, we focused on external communication and publicity of activities. We published news about our events and works in regional press as well as country press, in the periodics of Lithuanian community abroad. Reports about us were presented on television. There is the World Lithuanian News. We had some presentations here, and what is also, I think, very important, that we presented our project in IFLA. It's the biggest congress, World Congress of Librarians, so we presented this project as the possibility, as the method of working in libraries. And now the main task is to prepare methodology for the teachers with a possibility to apply our projects by themselves at schools. So what are planned results? If in few words, by providing knowledge about the immigration process, students should be able to formulate an individualized, science-based approach to this phenomenon. Not think their friends, their relatives, but like they know from all the basis of theoretical material that they had during this project. And summarizing my paper, I want to emphasize that the educational activities and educational project has a good perspectives for developing school training content. These kind of activities should be intensified in order to provide students with knowledge about current events, current phenomenon, or problems of our country, our society, or with global issues as well. And libraries having all necessary information and convenient research tool, as well as good experts in libraries, they can cooperate in the implementing the training process. So thank you for your attention. Ooh.
You were extremely quick. So, but the more time we have for questions.
Tundan Smith from Australia again. For how long has your project been running, and has there been enough time already to start evaluating its success, whether it works or not?
We have 3 separate projects for for 3 years. 1 year we had in one region, another year in another region. So we had possibility to compare and to, yes, it's possibility to evaluate these results. What?
What are the results?
Results will be presented at the, as I mentioned, in scientific article that now the sociologist is working on it.
I would like to know, are there similar projects in Latvia or Estonia? And do you think that you could export your results to those countries in the European Union, especially in the East, who are not willing to accept refugees and who have a story of sending refugees abroad, like the Baltic states have?
Yeah, I haven't heard about the similar project, unfortunately, and maybe, yes, it could possibility to cooperate. But first of all, I think we have to study the educational systems in Latvia and Estonia and to compare. Maybe it's not a big problem in these countries like in Lithuania.
First of all, I would like to say it's a wonderful project, especially to broaden the horizon of the kids. And that brings me to my first question, like how do you define the students? Like, are they like 5th graders, or are they like in universities, or like how old are the students you were talking about? What is the target group?
Students that I mentioned, there are students of gymnasium.
Okay, I missed that, I'm sorry, yeah. So, and my other question is, like, you mentioned something in the course of your project, the students did some interviews with the immigrants.
Yes.
And like, who is the immigrant? Like, are they the old ones, or are the new immigrants, or like, how do you
There were
define
new
those?
immigrants from the country, from the region where we implemented the project. So if, for example, the project took place in Ukmergė district, so we had interview with the immigrants from this Ukmergė district who now live abroad in different countries, and now it's possibility to make interview with them when they coming back, or even via Skype or other possibilities.
Okay, and the immigrant, it can be like someone who went abroad for studying, or like someone who found the job like good 20 years ago, so it...
No, they were new immigrants and mostly economical immigrants.
Okay, thank you.
Because this kind of immigration is the biggest at the moment in Lithuania.
Okay, I'm from Estonia. And I'd like to ask, I understood that the main aim is to give a message that don't emigrate anymore. Isn't it?
No, no. That this decision, emigrate or not emigrate, have been done individually. But then the students or the pupils, when they have enough knowledge about it, what emigration is, because sometimes their arguments are that I will emigrate because my friend or my, I don't know, younger or older brother did it. Mm-hmm. So they have formulated their own opinion about it.
Okay, but at first I was when I heard that you will talk about education, then I need to tell you that in Estonia we have a kind of organization who deals with the real education. It's in digital, it's based on websites, and they teach Estonian, and they even teach Estonian curriculum to the immigrants, because we think that maybe one nice day they want to come back, and maybe they want to study in our universities. It's the the educational matter. That's what I wanted to tell.
Thank you for information. It's interesting.
So, some more questions or comments? No. Not at the moment. Okay, thank you
Thank you very much.
once again. So, and yeah, this session ends up right now, and we are going to have a lunch here. And once again, those who want to take a part in excursion starting 2:30, then please gather in the foyer just after the lunch. And after the excursion, we are also having a coffee break just before leaving to the National Archives. And so for all of us, so bus to the National Archives will leave here in front of the museum 4:45. Please, let's be there 4:45 and then to the National Archives. So thank you all and see you quite soon.